Hello, greetings, and welcome to Cybersecurity Today. I'm Jim Wiggins, and we're happy you've decided to spend some time with us today as we explore the realm of cyberspace. So what is Cybersecurity Today? Well, it's a TV show designed to understanding the themes and topics affecting computer security. Our goal is to bring you relevant content within the cybersecurity world that can impact you, your family, and even the organization that you work for today. I'm joined today by Mr. Christopher Villas, who helps co-host the show. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm great. Looking forward to another episode.
Agreed. Can you tell us a little bit about what we've got in store for our audience today?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. As Jim mentioned, we're glad you're here with us today. We've got two segments planned for you today. First off, we'll cover current events in the cybersecurity industry. We call this our Cyber News Bites. Then we've got an interview planned on gender disparity in the cybersecurity workforce. Specifically, we're going to talk about why cybersecurity as a career field is dominated by men and how we can try and recruit and train more women in this area. We've got Miss Elena Steinke from the Women's Society of Cyberjutsu coming on the show to talk about why there aren't more women in this area and how we can attempt to increase this number so there's more gender equality when we think about cybersecurity professionals.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah. Let's go ahead and get to the news. So the first news article that we're going to talk about is a report that was released by the New York University's Brennan Center for Justice that linked social media accounts to the Russian Internet Research Agency, also known as the IRA. They began spreading brazen misinformation connected to the 2020 election as of last year. Facebook, as well as Instagram, removed behavior that was originated in Russia, and it was considered coordinated and inauthentic. The researchers tied the specific types of disinformation to this Russian Internet Research Agency that was primarily responsible for dividing the US electorate and promoting the campaign of now President Trump back in 2016.
Wow, big news. The Government Accountability Office, or GAO, identified in a recent report that federal agencies are creating cybersecurity risk due to narrowing the definition of what constitutes a data center. In its report, GAO noted that agencies closed 102 data centers in fiscal year 2019, with plans to close 148 more. The cyber risk comes from the fact that many IT facilities aren't being inventoried and tracked as full-fledged data centers. So the types of processes and standards that are being followed aren't as rigorous as average federal data center would be. Because of the narrower definition of what facilities should fall under an optimization program, it means that infrastructure is falling through the cracks. Falling through the cracks means many of these centers are not receiving the necessary oversight and risk management activities to ensure that they are adequately protected.
Quite interesting. Our next article is going to talk a little bit about T-Mobile disclosing a security incident recently where T-Mobile customers' personal information was compromised. In the announcement, T-Mobile notified customers about an attack against its email vendor that allowed for unauthorized access to some T-Mobile customers' email accounts and, by extension, certain types of their information. The information accessed in the incident included customer names, addresses, phone numbers, billing information, email addresses, account numbers, and even rate plans. Information such as credit card, social security information, and passwords appear not to have been compromised. Additionally, T-Mobile's response team indicated that they did not see any evidence that the disclosed and compromised information was misused. T-Mobile did recommend to their customers to review their account information and update account passwords.
Wow, another data breach.
Another data breach.
Becoming all too common.
And another example where you got to keep changing your passwords.
Absolutely. CrowdStrike recently released their 2020 CrowdStrike Global Threat Report. The report indicated in 2019, financially motivated cybercrime activities occurred on a consistent and regular basis. Ransomware was a key attack vector cited in the report. According to the report, these attackers have begun conducting data exfiltration, or the removal of data, enabling the weaponization of sensitive data through threats of leaking or embarrassing or proprietary information. Moving beyond cybercrime, nation-state adversaries continued their activities throughout 2019 targeting a wide range of industries. Another key trend in this year's report, both China and North Korea continuing to attack the telecommunications industry. The main drivers for these attacks are interest by countries such as China to steal intellectual property and competitive intelligence.
Yeah, we're seeing some continuous trends over and over again with malware and data breaches. So it's just another example of that.
Absolutely.
Our last news article that we're going to cover tonight, it deals specifically with the State Department. And the State Department announced recently that the United States government would give Ukraine $8 million in cybersecurity assistance funds as part of a cyber dialogue held in Kiev between officials from the two countries. The $8 million will go towards funding a new cybersecurity project sponsored by the United States Agency for International Development, also known as USAID, with the project setting a goal of eventually investing up to $38 million over the next 4 years in boosting Ukraine's cybersecurity capabilities. These capabilities would include things such as expanding the cyber workforce development and regulatory reforms within Ukraine. The U.S. previously gave Ukraine $10 million in cybersecurity assistance funds in 2017 as part of the first U.S.-Ukraine Cyber Dialogue Summit, with officials from the two countries meeting again in 2018 to revive cybersecurity projects between the two respective countries. Chris?
It's important to build those international partnerships in this area, especially as the nation-state adversaries continue their attacks.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is not a national focus thing, right? It's something that's worldwide, so absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that should bring you current on what's happening in the cybersecurity industry. We'll be back after a short break with our discussion with Miss Elena Steinke from the Women's Society of Cyberjutsu.
Today I'm going to talk to you about physics. Come on in, girls. Let's go. This is the first rocket to get humans to Mars.
Really tall.
I'm a rocket structural engineer, designing and building parts of the rocket. You are the generation that will be stepping foot on Mars. Do I have a group of astronauts on my hands?
Yes.
You can become a rocket scientist or whatever else you want to be.
And welcome back to Cybersecurity Today. Our next segment is going to deal with an interesting statistic that plagues the cybersecurity industry. Did you know that about 20% of the cybersecurity workforce is made up of women? That's a very low number considering that for most professions, the percentage of men to women is closer to 50-50 rather than 80-20. We want to explore this issue, and so we reached out to the Women's Society of Cyberjutsu, aka WSC. The Women's Society of Cyberjutsu is a national 501c3 nonprofit community focused on empowering women to succeed in the cybersecurity industry. From that organization is a board member, Miss Elena Steinke. Elena is a strategic and tactical architect with over 15 years of systems engineering and information security experience in developing solutions, providing strategic direction, designing, building, and directing cybersecurity operations across continents on multinational projects in the financial and U.S. federal sectors. Elena has stood up and directed multiple security operations centers, network operations centers, data centers, and management of virtualized storage technologies in elastic cloud environments. She holds a bachelor's in IT, an MBA, and is pursuing her second master's from Mercyhurst University in Applied Intelligence. When Elena is not a geek, she enjoys racing triathlons. Ms. Steinke, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
By the way, may I call you Elena?
Absolutely.
Great.
It's easier.
Well, let's get right into some questions that we have for you today, and we can discuss this fascinating statistic and maybe some potential solutions for it. So maybe you can start by talking a little bit more about the disparity that we went over and maybe some of the underlying reasons that, that are the cause of it.
Technology has traditionally been a male industry, and I think overall there haven't been too many women. But what is interesting that in the 90s, 40% of STEM-based programs in school, computer-related, were women. Nobody really knows why, and then statistics has changed. I heard a theory that perhaps at the time nobody had a PC at home, so everyone came into the field on an equal playing field. But now that everyone has a PC, boys tend to be a little more interested in going into the details. My son has Nerf guns. They don't last long. He takes them apart. He's curious to see how they're built. I can't say my daughter does the same thing. So that's one theory. So nobody knows. The statistics has changed. Now we're seeing a little bit more women entering the field than before. There are a lot of initiatives, and the numbers have been going up as far as the women entering the field, especially in cybersecurity. You had seen more women in technical fields, just not in cyber, but now you're seeing more women enter the field. However, the numbers are not changing by much. Women are dropping at alarming rates from the workforce, and that nobody exactly, there are some studies and theories, but I'm not sure anybody knows exactly why. But lots of us organizations are working really hard to make a difference and change that. That is concerning.
So there's efforts to get that number a little more to an equal level, but we're seeing high burnout rates.
There is a high burnout rate in the industry overall. There is never any downtime in cyber. There is a skills gap and a skills shortage, and there's only so much one can do. And especially women, we burn the candle on both ends. We have families. And we put in a lot of extra time in the office, especially at first. We're perceived differently. We're not measured on talent per se, we're measured on accomplishment. Of course, that's a generalization, so it depends. Every environment is different. But I can tell you from experience, and I'm an old lady, it takes me, when I go into a new place, usually it takes me 6 to 8 months before people begin to trust me, as opposed to my male counterparts. It's immediate. They come in, you language different ideas. Ooh, they're talented, they're going to help us, they're going to change, as opposed to me coming into new environments, unless people know me. There's a little more suspicion, and it's taken with a grain of salt. And only later, I have to sit quietly sometimes and wait for things to evolve, and only later they will notice, oh, she does know what she's talking about. So it can be very challenging. You have to, we have to prove ourselves. We're not automatically always accepted. And we're in the DC area, so we're sheltered here. So other parts of the country are even more difficult. I worked for a company that had 29 offices worldwide, and I traveled to different locations, and the experiences in the Midwest, I walked in and they just, I mean, they were very accepting, and I came out with some of my best friends came from there, but they looked at me and they had no idea what to do with me. They did not understand what I do.
They weren't sure what to make of you almost.
No, you just don't see that. We're a delta in the industry. And again, when I started in this, we were far and few in between, but now with the younger generation, you're seeing more women. I actually work with women now. I have 2 or 3 women that work with me, maybe 4 or 5, but that is practically unheard of.
A relatively new experience compared to a long...
Yeah, I had at one point, I had 500 people reporting to me, and maybe 2 were females, and that was a good statistic.
Wow.
Now you have
It's
more.
really enlightening to hear those kind of anecdotal stories, though, to put, you know, kind of personal experience to the statistics that we hear about.
Yeah, we were far and few in between. I would like to say that going to cyber conferences, this is the only time the female bathroom doesn't have a line.
So you did mention some of these job roles and statistics. So what are kind of job roles that women are primarily attracted to in the field, or is there a difference, or is it just?
I think generally speaking, and it's a gross generalization, there are lots of different scenarios, but you will see more women entering the field, but they will not be in highly technical roles. You will see them more in information assurance, governance, compliance, auditors, so you'll see them on that end. I don't think too many women are like myself, will have crimping cables. You will not see too many women cutting jackets and doing vampire taps or showing you what an RJ45 is or a unshielded twisted pair. So women like us are far and few in between. But you do see more women entering pen testing and other elements of the cyber field. But again, they tend to stay more on the soft. But again, it's changing. It's changing. But if looking at the overall cyber landscape, and it's a really broad field, cyber is a catch-all umbrella, you will see more women in information assurance and audit or program management roles.
Great. So what can companies do, or organizations, to kind of help to address this disparity in terms of their recruitment strategies or possible incentives or benefits that they offer?
This is an interesting question. I think it's quite the challenge. So first of all, the recruiting practices in general as it applies to cyber are off. I think there is a huge disconnect between the talent pool and HR.
Absolutely.
And companies are very desperate. And for a company to take 8 months to recruit somebody is a reflection of another problem. By that time, they could have had somebody trained too. Again, cyber is a catch-all umbrella, so they're asking for things that just don't exist. I had a call for a SOC manager position. They wanted me to have a background in firewall specialist and also know how to do Python. Why would a hardware person who is a firewall specialist know how to do software code? It's strange, and why do you really need it for SOC management? So the requirements for the job have to be in context. I think, especially women, we're looking for work-life balance, which is really hard in this field in general. But
there's always some new thing going on, and the hours can be quite long.
Yes, always something. There's never downtime. We're looking for female representatives. Sometimes it's the environment. So a lot of it is recruiting practices. I think they need to look at us as more of an individual as opposed to some kind of bucket. And I will tell you a personal story. I was on a job interview, and they were trying to sell me on taking the job by showing me the foosball machine, the bean bag, and I'm visibly not in my 20s or even 30s. And I pulled up in a minivan, which they saw, and they understand that I have a kid in high school.
Probably a family involved.
And I looked at the recruiter and I said, that's really great that you have a beanbag, but do you have somebody that would be able to help me out of the beanbag too? So, you know, asking me questions in the interview about what's my favorite part of the movie The Matrix. I don't remember exactly the questions, and I actually like the movie, but you have to put it in context. You don't ask an older person these type of things. So it's obvious that we're trying to attract young talent, although it's not malicious in nature. Let me take this back. It's obvious they were trying to attract talent, but not necessarily young, but they were clearly catering to the .coms or the young. So I think you have to look at the individual and what one is interested in is not what somebody else is interested in. So you're eliminating a group.
Would it be fair to say then that for organizations it would be in their interest if they're looking to find, you know, the best person for the best fit for the best position that they have? We're always striving for efficiency, but might need to do a little more tailoring and through the hiring and make sure that the process is a little more
Well, the job I'm in
linked.
now, I will tell you this much, I took it because of the woman who interviewed me, because I was looking forward to her mentoring and learning from her. And that resonated with me. It struck. I have not worked with women who have more experience than me, really, not in this field. I have not, and I was thinking that this would be a great opportunity. So when putting women forward, offering advancement opportunities, offering growth opportunities, and I think sometimes it's the approach. The same approach for men and women may not work, especially for younger. I think these type of things, and visibly showing, I don't think diversity is so much of an issue anymore, but inclusion very much is, and I can tell you that from personal experience.
Valuing of opinions in meetings and
exclusion
that type of
is
thing.
Still an issue, and there's a difference between inclusion, and inclusion. Yeah, I'm included in meetings. Does anybody really listen to me from the beginning? You know.
Like when you were talking about the ramp-up period to establish yourself at a new position.
When I go into organizations that are familiar with me, know my reputation, or I'm brought by peers, then it's different. But when I'm totally cold new, it takes a long time, sometimes longer, to establish that.
Let's dive in a little bit. You mentioned younger people. What about much younger people, say young women or girls who are going through maybe more formative periods like middle school, high school? What, in terms of education and planning, if this is a career field that interests them, what might be some key considerations for them, types of programs or...
So this is a good question, and this actually also talks to why there aren't too many women in this field. One of the reasons is because a lot of women and girls don't know about this as an option for them. So it is up to us to go and introduce this to them. I was raised in this profession by men. Men helped me be who I am today, but now there are women, and it is for us to go and mentor other girls. I think that's really important, and at a critical age. We want to introduce this at an early age. Elementary school, middle school is a great age, and various programs that would be interesting to girls that are impressionable and drive it as something very interesting. The industry sells this or markets this profession as a young boy sitting in the basement of his home with a hoodie.
We've all seen the stereotype,
yeah,
right?
but that's not true. I do my stuff in the kitchen while I'm making dinner and cooking for the kids and doing homework with them.
Yeah,
So
certainly not true in my experience either.
So I think a lot of it is marketing, and it's us stepping out there are the ones that are changing how it's perceived. And there are lots of programs, and we need to get girls more involved, and it's really for us. You made it, send the elevator back down. For the last 8 years, that's exactly what WSC has been doing. We're out there in the community, we're reaching out to young girls, women, young girls, and we're trying to get them interested through various programs and just being out there, role models.
Would you say that, do STEM programs that are, it seems like a lot of high schools are starting up these STEM programs that focus a little more heavily on those kind of
there are a lot
foundational
of programs,
elements, and are those a benefit for someone looking to get into?
I think so. There are lots of really wonderful programs out there. I do a lot of work with the Civil Air Patrol. I'm one of the STEM officers, and I taught the Cyber Academy this summer in Fort Meade, and I had, I want to say 65, 67 cadets, and 15 were girls. I have never seen such a staggering number. And I will tell you that I had a really tough time explaining the Linux file structure and directory to them. And I used the shoe analogy, Jimmy Choo shoes, Jessica Simpson shoes, and the girls got it. So there are lots of wonderful—
Got to know your audience, right?
Yeah, you got to know your audience. So there are lots of wonderful programs out there in high school, outside of high school, and they're all very beneficial, and it's personal preference, what's right for one. But there are lots of wonderful programs out there, and if you are over the age of 13, you're eligible for CompTIA Plus certification, Security Plus, Net Plus, and high schools are pushing towards that, and lots of programs are pushing towards that these days.
Would you say that 2 or 4 year degree programs are, how valuable is that if someone's looking to try and get in this field?
So this is
I have
tough
a combination
question.
myself of degree and professional certification, so I'm curious what your perspective is.
So this is tough. I would never knock down education. I'm a firm believer in education. But it's not for everyone necessarily, and just because you're educated formally through college does not necessarily mean you have certain competencies. Depends where you are and what your industry, which industry you're in. Sometimes you're having a CISSP in this area because of the government requirements is valued, versus a degree not so much. Supply and demand is also a thing. So I think it's a personal preference, it's a personal choice. I believe in education, obviously, but it's not an old be-all. Private industry doesn't care about certifications, and they don't really care about education as much. They care about capabilities.
Demonstrated skills.
So I think it's personal preference. It's whatever drives you. You need to go for it. From whichever angle it's right for the individual.
Would it be fair to say for people who are considering, then maybe just focus your research if you're looking for a particular spot in this field, and that'll kind of drive what requirements?
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that education in cyber is fairly new. So when you graduate, I don't think universities have gotten down pat just yet. Some better than others, but I don't think you really graduate with a cyber degree and really can go into the workforce as you would with engineering degrees. That they understand. They can train an electric engineer, they can train in computers, civil engineer, computer science, but not cyber. You walk out of a 4-year degree or a master's in cyber, and you're like a deer in the headlights almost. You have formal education, but the context is not quite there. Again, some do it better than others, but I think it's still working through its kinks.
Great. So I did want to get a little bit of time for your organization, the Women's Society of Cyberjutsu. You're a board member there.
I am.
Can you tell us just a little bit more about the organization and maybe how, if someone is interested in getting involved, how they might do that?
Yes, this is one of the things I'm most proud of. There were several of us. I'm one of the original founders. We founded it in 2012. We had a vision. We didn't know exactly where we were going. We all grew up together with it, through it. And this has gone beyond our imagination. We're almost in every state.
Wow.
We have many, many programs for women and young girls. Lots of hands-on training. We provide lots of classes, mentorship, support, community. I certainly know that this has been my source of support for anything and everything, whether it's
that's fantastic.
I mean, to vent, to cry, to understand, to mentor. I mentor, but I have mentors, and it's easy to find us on the web, www.womenssocietyofcyberjutsu.com.
Easy enough to remember.
Yep. Womencyber.com. So just Google us, and you will find us.
Are there any particular trainings or programs that the Society promotes for its members?
We try to focus on hands-on technical, but we pretty much offer the gamut.
Okay.
I think one of the things that we're really good for is that we offer a good sampling.
Okay.
So I've taken snort classes,
So just a
pen
wide
testing,
range.
wireless cracking. Yeah, it's a wide range. So you get to sample what you like, what you don't like, and figure things out.
Right. Well, the hands-on training, that's
hands-on.
incredibly valuable.
I've taught a lot of classes. I've taken a lot of classes. I've taught A&A classes, how to put security packages together, how to do assessments. But there are also technical classes. So I think this is probably one of the most valuable things for the price you can get. You can go in and sample and figure out what you like and what you don't.
Well, I think that brings us to time. So, Elena, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
So with that, we're going to end today's show. We appreciate you joining us today and look forward to seeing you again on a future episode of Cybersecurity Today. Please feel free to learn more about the show by visiting www.cybersecuritytoday.org. Thanks again and have a great day.